Let's talk about why this is the best MacBook Pro to purchase going into 2024. I've made several videos recently on this channel talking about this laptop and comparing it to the M3 Max. This is the M1 Max, and before I dive into the reasons that are obvious, like price and performance and stuff like that, I want to talk about how we got here. Why do I think we have a laptop like this that is over 2 years old now that performs just as well in most cases as an M3 Max, which is 2 generations newer? Well, first of all, the M1 Max was the first powerhouse MacBook Pro that came out with Apple Silicon. It was the switch from Intel chips to Apple Silicon. And so Apple really had to blow it out of the park. They had to outperform everything by a landslide. And I remember when the M1 Max was announced and they were showing the performance specs of really the whole M1 lineup with the Pro and the Max, and I was blown away. I had the previous year Intel MacBook Pro, and I felt like I had a dinosaur at that rate because the M1 Max was so amazing. So I truly believe that Apple had to really put everything that they had into the M1 lineup, both with the regular M1 chips, but also with the Pro, the Max, and even the Ultra in the Mac Mini Studio or whatever it's called. And the reason that they did that is so that they could blow Intel out of the water and have all the fanfare and excitement that comes along with those crazy specs that were there. But is it realistic to keep on that trajectory where M1 was a milestone breakthrough and then M2 is huge gains and M3 is huge gains? I don't think it really makes sense for Apple to do that. And I think that they borrowed from their future profitability a little bit to make the M1 that powerful. And so we spent the next year with M2 not being super exciting, and now M3 we were thinking, okay, 2 generations later it should be crazy powerful, but it's not really that much more powerful, and so people are doing benchmarks and it's not that exciting. And that's really because I think Apple is trying to find a curve in which they can travel realistically. And I truly believe that they could build something with M10 performance, whatever that might look like. They could follow that trajectory because all of these chip makers and manufacturers have the ability to go much further than they do. They're only going to release performance increases that they think we need every single year, and not a computer that's going to cannibalize their sales for the next decade. With the M2 and the M3, I feel like Apple is just kind of letting everybody else catch up while still maintaining a healthy lead as far as performance goes. And so we aren't going to expect crazy milestone performance increases that blow everything out of the water. Yes, I am a little frustrated that an M1 like this laptop performs in most cases just as good as an M3, but that is the journey that Apple went on so that they can blow Intel chips out of the water and give everybody a reason to jump on board with Apple Silicon. Now, there's a second reason that I think the whole switch to Apple Silicon is making us a little bit more crazy with the M1, M2, M3 than it used to when we were on Intel chips. With Intel chips, we didn't really have any way to know, unless you were really a techie person, which generation of a MacBook Pro you had. It was like, did you have a late 2019 MacBook Pro or an early 2017? What did you have? And that wasn't how we talked about the different versions of laptops that we had. Most people had no idea what version of laptop they had. They weren't sure what generation Intel chip they had inside of it. There wasn't a way to quantify it. It wasn't like the iPhone where you can say, well, what iPhone do you have? Well, I have the iPhone 15. Oh, well, my iPhone 13 is still great, but you feel like your iPhone 13 is really old because it's 2 generations old. And while the iPhone 13 is still a fantastic iPhone and most people don't need an iPhone 15, the fact that you have an iPhone 13 and an iPhone 15 exists makes you feel like your iPhone is a little bit outdated and old. And Apple has done that with the switch to Apple Silicon and naming their chips M1, M2, M3. And you'll notice even with the iPad Pro or the iPads that have an M1, M2, or soon an M3 chip in them, it does the same thing to you emotionally when you have a few generations older of a device. And so I believe that's where the whole like FOMO and also frustration comes into play as we move through these different generations. We have the M1, which had to be a powerhouse because it had to blow Intel out of the water. And now we have to kind of get to a realistic performance performance increase every single year that makes sense. And so Apple has done that in a sense with the M2 and then with the M3, but it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing milestone as far as performance to where we're like, yes, it's clear that I want to spend this much more money on an M3 over an M1. This is where we're going to have to get used to this. If you are a PC person and you're into gaming and performance as far as Windows PCs go, then you know when you have a GPU that is a few generations old. For example, the NVIDIA GTX 4000 series cards have been out for a while, really, and I still have a 1000 series card in my PC, and that feels like a relic. It performs perfectly fine for me and gets everything done that I need it to get done, but it makes me feel like it's really old. And in that PC is a first generation AMD Threadripper chip, and I know that there's been multiple generations since then, and I know that it's old because I keep up on that technology. But most people didn't have really a clear idea of what generation the chips were inside of their MacBook Pro because they weren't paying attention to what Intel generation was being used. An i7 was an i7, an i9 was an i9, even though it was a different generation of an i7 or an i9 or even an i5 or whatever one that you were using. You just didn't have a way to quantify how old that chip was. Now we do, just like an iPhone. We know that our Mac is a few years old easily because the new generation comes out, and it makes us feel like our laptop is older. So while it's a smart decision on Apple's part to market their chips that way using that naming convention, it makes us feel like things are a little bit older. And it definitely makes us feel frustrated when the performance increases aren't substantial like it was when we first got the M1. So why should you buy an M1 instead of buying an M3? The M3 should be better because it's newer, right? Well, there's still a lot of M1s available on the market, and they're substantially cheaper. For example, this M1 Max right here, which is a fully spec'd out, top of the line, with the exception of a 4 terabyte storage instead of an 8 terabyte. So this particular M1 Max has maximum RAM and maximum CPU. Everything is maxed out except the storage. And you can get this $1,900 cheaper than it was new, which is substantial savings. And so you purchase this laptop, you can still get it brand new. I've got links down in the description below to where you can get it brand new. There's tons of configurations left if you don't need it maxed out like this one. And you can also get it with Apple Care still as well. Yes, you're buying a laptop that may be a few years old since it was actually produced, but I believe that it was produced in a way to exist at the same level as laptops today because of the fact that they needed to blow Intel out of the water, which they did. So the same configuration of this laptop, but an M3 is going to cost you $5,999. And so you'll save $3,000 by purchasing this laptop, and you're not going to get substantial performance gains out of an M3. If you want to see the differences in performance out of the M3 versus the M1 Max, definitely check out my other videos. I've got them linked down below for you. But saving $3,000 on a laptop and getting insane performance is a win for me. Even if you decided you didn't want to go all the way back to an M1 and you wanted to go with last year's M2 model, you can still get this configured device right here for $4,299, which is still $1,700 of savings over an M3. So substantial savings, and you're not really getting less performance by much by going with an M2 Max or an M1 Max. Now, I've scoured through the specs trying to find any main differences between these laptops, the M1, the M2, or the M3, as far as the device itself. Yes, there is a different chip in there. There's an M1, an M2, or an M3, and there's some little differences with the storage and also with the memory. But as far as the laptop itself, they are the same body design and style. If somebody didn't necessarily know what they were looking at and you didn't have the new black color that the M3 comes in, nobody would know which device you have because they look exactly the same. The display is the same. The keyboard is the same. The trackpad is the same. Everything is pretty much the same. The ports are the same. The charging is the same. The size of the battery is the same. All of these things are the same. So aside from the chip, you're not really getting that much of a difference. Yes, there are some things under the hood that are different. If you look at some of those channels where they take the laptop apart and look at the cooling mechanisms and all of those things on the inside, there have have been some changes to the inside of the laptops for sure. But is that substantial enough to make up for the fact that you can get an M2 for $1,700 less or an M1 for $3,000 less? I don't think so. If I was still on an Intel-based MacBook Pro and I was looking to jump into the world of M-series Apple Silicon chips, it would be a hard sell for me to jump straight to an M3 and spend that premium dollar to not really get anything too exciting. The prices increased substantially moving up to the M3, with these M3 Maxes being very expensive in comparison to what you can get when you could still buy an M2 or an M1 brand new. And when you're not getting a better webcam, a better display, a better keyboard, a better battery, any of that stuff, it's really hard to fork over all of that extra money for essentially just a new color option of a laptop. Now, that's simplifying things. There are definitely performance increases in certain areas out of the M3 Max that the M1 Max and even the M2 Max can't live up to. But if you are jumping up from an Intel-based MacBook Pro, the differences are going to be so huge compared to what you had with the Intel that the M1 Max is going to feel like a rocket ship, and an M3 would not give you that much more of a gain in overall performance, especially if you are looking to upgrade for video editing purposes. Obviously, there are some use cases like 3D rendering, music production, and stuff like that, where an M3 does get some decent gains, but is it $3,000 worth of additional gains when you can get this laptop right here and save yourself a ton of money? I know that if I was moving up from an Intel to Apple Silicon going into 2024, an M1 Max would be the option for me because I'd get insane gains over what I was used to, and I'd be able to save a lot of money. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I take a couple of useful comments and include those in my tech newsletter that I release once a week. So if you want something that's actually halfway decent in your email, make sure to sign up for that newsletter. The link is in the description below. Thanks so much for being here. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you back in another one soon.